Good afternoon. First, I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Nuqat team, the incredible Nuqat team, for all they've done to date. And I look forward to seeing their story continue to flourish and grow in the coming years, inshallah. And that's actually what I'm here to talk about today. Story. A good story can literally change your life. It can transform you as a person. It can make up your entire moral code. Whether that story is the oldest of texts, like the Holy Quran, for instance, or some of our region's most fabled works of literature, or even the Western world's classic masterpieces, it doesn't really matter where your story comes from. What matters is that the appeal of the power of storytelling appeals to everyone. All of us here can remember sitting in a circle, surrounded by friends, whether it's in a school or around a campfire. We remember the experience of being able to devour that story. All of a sudden, we forget our surroundings. We are completely taken with the narrative. Regardless of where you're from and what your beliefs are, you are all transported equally. First, you forget who you're with, and then all of a sudden you realize that the people you're with are just mirrors of yourself in different ways. And when the lights come back on, and when the pages on a book run out, you snap right back into a world, which now for some reason seems just so alien. Why is that, do you suppose? Why is it that the 120 minutes we'd spend watching a great film, or the days reading a fantastic book, why is that now our new reality? Why does it feel like our sense of being has been transformed? Is it because we yearn for some sort of connection, some sort perhaps of escape, or we're looking for knowledge? I'm sure it's a little bit of all those things, but in this lecture I want to take it perhaps just a tiny bit forward. I want to explore another reason. I feel the reason stories are so impactful, they hit us so deeply, is because they are our starting points.
Okay. Stop.
Yes, I'm going to close this one.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's fine. They form our foundation, and they give us hard times with computers. Hold on one second. Okay, thank you. So, as I was saying, they form our starting points. They form our foundation, our ground zero, if you will. Stories allow us to think what's happening in the world around us. For each and every one of us, they connect the dots. They make up a circle. Life is hard, but when you have a story to turn to, for some reason, again, it just makes it so much easier to know that there's a story that speaks to you. A famous novelist by the name of Thomas King once said, "The truth about stories is that's all we are." I know that sounds a little bit tense, but let's think about it for a second. How many times have you sat in a coffee shop and caught a glimpse of the person standing next to you and made up an entire mental story about that person? And then when you add the visual component to it, the person's physicality, for instance, the story takes on a completely new dimension. It becomes more dynamic, more vibrant, and a bit more crazy. But that's what happens every day, and I can tell you that I'm sure all of us here have been on the receiving end of this mental composition process. while sitting in your car at a traffic light or reading at a restaurant, somebody has looked at you and made up a story about you. And this is actually making me very nervous right about now, because I'm sure you're all standing here, and some of you at least are wondering what my story is. And so I think I should tell you that I'm a bit infatuated with stories because I love them so much. I turned them into my career, first in news, then in film. During my film career, I worked on a number of projects that put my imagination into overdrive and allowed me to take risks, but through them I understood the power of storytelling. The first project I had the pleasure of working on was about an Islamic explorer by the name of Ibn Battuta, and it was about his journey to Mecca in the 13th century. We started, my team and I, going into development on this film a few years after 9/11. We opened a little production office in New York City, and we decided to start developing it and raising funds. People around us, literally, they thought we were crazy. Nobody wanted to give us any financing for the film. And it was understandable because we were literally in the middle of where the ground zero there was. So feeling very demoralized and losing stamina by the day, we were ready to pack up and go home. But then one day my executive producer walked into the room, Jake Eberts, the late Jake Eberts, who happens to be the great mind behind Gandhi and Dances with Wolves. So he walks into the room very excited. He says, and of course I'm sitting with my head literally on the table because I'm just ready to go home. There's nothing that could be done at this point. And he looks at me and says, Zain, we need to make this film. And I said, I know, that's why we're here, but there's nobody's financing, we need to go home. And he said, no, I just got a call from a very dear friend, and he says that we must make this film because the world needs it. And I looked at him and I said, wow, who's smart friend, who's your friend? And he said, looking at me, oh, you don't need to know who my friend is. And I said, of course, this guy seems brilliant, I need to meet him. Who's this guy? And he says, the Dalai Lama. It's a true story. I still can't remember, I still can't believe it. So after 5 years and countless rejection letters, freezing cold nights in a desert camp in the middle of the Moroccan desert, endless one-on-one meetings, a Cessna plane trip ride across the Atlas Mountains where I swear to God I thought I was going to die that day. Confusion every single day, severe dust storms, countless crew members, both human and livestock, hundreds of permits, and a magnificent helicopter ride later. Journey to Mecca made its world premiere at the Smithsonian's Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C., and went on to open in a number of other worldwide venues around the world. During the Washington screening, During the Washington screening, a US Senator who was very prominent at the time came up to me and he said, Zain, I used to watch those news images about Hajj on the nightly news, especially during 9/11. They used to replay them all the time. And I always thought there was something sinister brewing underneath all that white cloth. And he looked at me dead in the eye, teary-eyed, and said, I was wrong and I'm sorry. So, today, however, I need to tell you something. I spent 5 years working on this film, but I also produced other projects that saw me going from a spectator like you are right now to assistant stagehand. Aziz is smiling because he knows what I'm talking about. Aziz, so yeah, it's the process of filmmaking is quite crazy because you don't start from the top. You have to literally start from holding the wires, holding down cords when everybody's gone home, and that's where it matters because you start as a spectator. You understand what you want to see in the story, and then you become the curtain puller, and from the curtain puller you become the assistant a stagehand if you're lucky. And then from there you become even better, the assistant ringmaster. And I'm sorry to use circus connotations here, but it is very much actually like a circus. And then from the assistant ringmaster, you become the substitute for the actual ringmaster, his understudy, his or her understudy. And so today I am still the assistant to the ringmaster, the understudy. But hopefully one day I hope to tell a story great enough to make me an actual ringmaster, or at least substitute for the ringmaster every other Tuesday. So, today as well, I'm speaking to you from another place in the ring. I'm no longer the actual visual performer that I used to be, at least for now. I am actually that person, you know, when you walk into a circus, in the middle there's a huge sand pit where all the performers perform. So pretty much I have a rake, and I'm trying to rake the sand so that the sand is smooth for all kind of the visual artists to do all their magnificent artistry and that all the machinery can work correctly. That's what I'm doing today. Along with my colleagues, I'm able to perhaps facilitate the ground for those artists to tell their stories seamlessly and unobstructedly. But what I'm trying to say is no matter where you are in this ring, if you're a spectator, if you're a ringmaster, if you're a sandraker, whatever you are, the story affects you in exactly the same way. There's no one that's not affected by the story in parallel to everybody else around them. It works really on the same level. Stories make us feel connected and give us a sense of affirmation. I remember during my early teenage years, I was going through a time like most teenagers do, where they feel lost and confused, like they just don't know what they want to do with their lives. And my poor parents, they tried countless ways to get me interested in this or that, and I wasn't interested in anything. Until one day, my mother handed me a copy of this book. In it, there's a scene where Willy Wonka tells the kids in his factory, "We are the music makers. We are the dreamers of dreams." And that line just stuck with me. But I didn't consciously join the storytelling circle, I think, until in seventh grade, when my teacher read us excerpts from this book. In this book, there's an excerpt where Alice just lands in Wonderland, and she is confused. She doesn't know where to go. She's lost, and she reaches a fork in the road where she meets the Cheshire Cat, and the cat turns to her and says, she asks the Cheshire Cat where she should go, and the cat turns and says to her, "It doesn't matter where you want to go if you don't really know. It doesn't matter where you want to go or why you." Sorry, I have to read it because I forgot it. "If you don't know where you want to go, it doesn't really matter which way you go." And that, actually, I have it in my office every day, and I look at this because it still speaks to me today. And then a few years after that, in my high school class, I was handed a book by my English teacher, and she made us read it. And I use "made" very strongly here because I didn't find this book interesting at the time. I actually find it quite boring, but it is a magnificent piece of literature. And I read it, and I turned in my assignment, my book report after reading, and I just didn't think about it at all after that, until the morning of August 2nd, 1990. I was in London at the time, and my parents were in Kuwait. And that was the morning, if I'm sure you're familiar, that Saddam's troops crossed the border into Kuwait. And I remember just feeling so alone and feeling so confused, like how could something like this happen? And then another line came to mind from this book, the book that I found so boring that I thought didn't move me at all. And the line is, "There's a lot of ugly things in this world, son. I wish I can keep them all away from you. But that's never possible." This is a line that one of the characters says to his son while confronting him after a violent street attack. And for some reason, that line just made me feel comforted. I just didn't need anything after that. So, a few years after that, I had the pleasure of reading excerpts from Alf Layla wa Layla, 1001 Nights, and I devoured with great passion how Shahrazad became her own savior. She literally used the power of storytelling to save her life. So the question remains, can stories save our life? I would argue that they can, and actually they do on a daily basis. Because from stories we derive our humanity. We get in touch, we get connected to our human soul. We receive affirmation that our life has meaning. There was a famous TV host by the name of Mr. Rogers. He once said, "Frankly, there isn't anyone you couldn't learn to love once you've heard their story." So what does that mean to us today? Well, if you'll allow me, I want to go back to this circle. The circle we sat in while listening to stories when we were young. The circle the semicircle we're in today at Nuqat. By listening to and telling stories to each other and to ourselves, we are coming back to that circle. We are rekindling that bond with ourselves and with others. There's a reason that Amazon named its reading tablet the Kindle. But that's another lecture, so I'll go back to what I'm saying. Once you add a visual component to a story, it takes on a completely different dimension. And when you add a music score to that, it even takes it up a notch. For example, sound? There's another scene that I'd like you to show, but This is the excerpt from Alice in Wonderland on film. And this is where Alice just lands in Wonderland and realizes she's completely lost and doesn't know where to go. And I'm not gonna bore you with the whole thing, but sorry, I don't have the controls for the video with me here. And this is the excerpt from To Kill a Mockingbird. And as you can see, when you're a little girl and these images start to move in front of you, what you've read in the text start to take form, then it takes on, like I said, just a completely different dimension. You are in a whole new world. Stories are also a priceless culture-shaping tool. They transmit what is important to us as a community. They transmit what's important to the tribe, to the clan. They teach us right from wrong, good from bad. As young children, they also teach us the consequences of our actions. So, can you imagine if that happened in real life? The question here is, can storytelling really change our culture? And if it can, how can we measure its power? How can we measure its impact? And the answer to that question is quite simply, we can't. And it's that fact that actually makes it, the fact that it's immeasurable, that makes it just so powerful. Of course, today we live in a world where we're exposed to media all the time, to information. It's cheap, it's accessible, it's unlimited. So the question really isn't whether or not information is available to us and impactful enough. It needs to be impactful in a way unlike no other. It needs to hit us really hard. Webster Dictionary defines impact as something that has the capacity to hit with great force, something that has the capacity to directly affect us. Today, for something to be truly impactful at both a micro and macro level, it must hit at a very intimate chord inside of us, and it must generate enough power, enough energy to be able to transmit outside our physical selves. And it has to hit us emotionally, it has to hit us intellectually, it has to hit us aesthetically even. At the end of this process, it has to, once it leaves our physical being, hit others in the same way to create movement, to create action. And no other storytelling medium has the lore, the force, the speed, and scope to be able to do so as the art form known as cinema. And that's what I want to focus on. How can visual storytellers utilize cinema to affect their surroundings and in turn allow their surroundings to inspire their stories and instigate real social change? Why choose cinema? After all, by definition, visual storytelling refers to anything that uses digital media as a way to transmit or transform its story to the masses. And so, with all due respect to all my incredible still photographers in the audience today, and all our graphic designers and our marketing execs, they're all also visual storytellers, and they have all, through their projects, impacted their societies in great ways. So again, why did I choose cinema? Because first of all, I only have 20 minutes for this lecture, and second, because that's my ground zero. Through cinema, no matter how I feel, I can always turn to a film that I know will share in my range of emotion. And I do hope that I don't sound preferential or selfish here, but I think that a lot of people around the world maybe feel the same way I do, even if they don't know it. For a lot of people, cinema is their ground zero. If I can bet any of us sitting here today in the audience can't really remember the time when they first got on a bike, learned how to ride a bike, or the first time when they received their college diploma, or the first day on a job, for instance. But I bet they can remember when this beautiful lady descended on us from the skies of London with her black umbrella. I'm sure you can remember not just the moment that happened, but who you were with and what you were eating while you watched that frame. Or when the Banks children saw her for the first time. Or when we watched Sandy, Danny, and friends dance their way through an amusement park. Or when Don Corleone saw Sunny for the first time in the mortuary. Cinema gave us one of our first royal weddings. It showed us the impact of color. It shared with us our frustrations and our triumphs. It introduced us to heroes and to villains. It also introduced us to the incredible men of our faith and to our past comedians. So again, if you need another reason why cinema, well, because cinema is fast and it's absorbing in a way that the written word can't be and needn't be, really. Cinema you can watch with YouTube today, anytime, anyhow, anywhere. And when you watch films in a movie theater, you are doing so in a room with other people. And even though they are strangers, you can almost feel a sense of community. When you laugh in unison, or when wiping away your tears, you laugh together, you cry together in a movie theater. And no other art form can give you that communal emotional experience. So that's why cinema. I want to add another point here. There was a time when films, stories were only controlled by the powerful, when those that controlled the money controlled the stories. Today, if you still feel the same way about that, then I am very happy to inform you that you are very wrong. With the advent of new technologies, anyone with a smartphone and an internet connection can shoot a film, tell a story, and have everyone see it. But for some of us, still, the weight of a camera is priceless. And for that also, there is today digital technology that's relatively cheap, that you can rent, and really anything in addition to that would mean you just need a few lights, a couple of lights, software, a computer, and a few friends, and you're ready to go. I might add that the few friends you need for moral support, because more than anything else, because if, like me, you had decided to take up a career in filmmaking, then you might be a little bit insane, and you do need all the help you can get from your friends, believe me. But that's also another lecture. So, with the tools now available to us, what stood in the way in the not so distant past to make great films, to make great cinema, was censorship. And today, I can honestly say that, again, with the advent of new technology, our filmmakers, the world's filmmakers, talented, resourceful people, are doing the following. That's how a lot of us feel about censorship today. So, young people no longer need to wait at the doors of the state censors to receive film permission. And to screen their films, forget about it. You can do that everywhere and anywhere. They're able to tell their stories undisputedly through one of two ways. Digital technology is available, as we mentioned, and then there's another thing, subliminal messaging and imagery. And I think this is the clever of the two ways, because anyone, literally, if anyone shoots a film and presses the share button, anyone could do that, but to be able to tell a story, to be able to tell a forbidden story, and to be able to do it effectively is the challenge here. And subliminal messages, imagery, that's the way to do it. And nobody in the world, this is my personal opinion, nobody in the world does it as well as our friends in Tehran. Iranian cinema, the Iranian cinema culture is built on poetry, it's built on resistance. Our Iranian filmmakers, the technique they use mostly is they utilize the power of innocence. They use children in their films. This is just one of the many techniques, but I want to stress on this one. Because the theory is that when a child says it, of course crafted in a very detailed way, it's acceptable to society. So you see their filmmakers, Kiarostami, you see Majidi, you see, and if you haven't seen these films, I urge you, please, to rent them, to see them, to watch them, download them. They are phenomenal. Majidi, Panahi, all these incredible filmmakers, that's what they do. And they do it just, again, so beautifully. The Apple is a film by Samira Makhmalbaf. a very talented young filmmaker at the time, and not only did she utilize children, but she really was able to find a way to blur the line between reality and fantasy. She talked about gender inequality and social injustice in a way that I haven't seen in cinema, in this region cinema. So I urge you to take a look at those films. So again, what makes also Iranian cinema so powerful today is the fact that good and evil doesn't exist in Iranian cinema. The circumstances that characters find themselves in always come from their social and economic conditions, and their actions are determined by those conditions. So why is that impactful? Well, it impacts us at our core, at our ground zero. So what happens when you take this art form and put it in the hands of the largest growing demographic in the world, the youth community? Well, in short, magic happens. But in order to make this happen in our community, we need to build a circle sturdy enough to hold the heaviest of stories. A while back, I was at a film festival and I was representing Kuwait and a film that I had produced at the time. And this film festival, I've always dreamed about going to it. And I was there and I was being interviewed by a reporter, and I was wondering to myself why I wasn't very excited. I thought by going to this film festival, that's it, I've reached my aim in life. There's nowhere else I can go in the world in film. But I felt empty. It just wasn't working for me. And a reporter asked me a question, then I understood exactly why I was feeling this way. She asked me, how does it feel to have a Kuwaiti film represented and in competition at one of the most important festivals in the world? And I looked at her and I couldn't answer the question, because the film I was representing at the time that I had produced was not Kuwaiti. It wasn't a Kuwaiti story. So I felt very sad and very demoralized, and I went back to my hotel room that evening after that film had won the prestigious Critical Choice Award at the festival. Instead of celebrating with my friends, I just didn't feel like it. And I went to my room and feeling quite down, really. I wrote down these 5 letters on a piece of paper, Adasa. And then Adasa, the next morning, thinking what could that be an acronym for? Artists Demanding a Storytelling Association. So the question was now I have this concept, what do I do with it? And over the days that followed, a conceptual groundwork started forming for a Kuwaiti visual incubator. And one day I hope the dream was to turn the word demanding, to cross it out and turn it into demonstrating, artists demonstrating a storytelling association. And I'm proud to report today that with Nuqat, with many other initiatives like this, we are well on the way to making this happen. Another thing I want to talk about, and about Adasa, guys, there is another presentation coming up by the team that's actually running Adasa on Saturday. So I really do hope that whoever's interested in that would join them also. In Kuwait today, the issue lies not in how to tell our story really, but how to make our story matter. More and more our visual artists are utilizing film to bridge the gap between social, political, religious groups. But only a few of them are able to go into the world community, and that's because, it's not because they can't, it's because they still need the tools to make that happen. They're still shooting and getting at a microchord when we need to be working on a macro chord. And so for that to happen, we need to have our masses feel with our stories. We need to penetrate deep enough to have some action. We all know what it's like not to care. We watch TV every day and we shift through all these programs, and all of a sudden, once in a while, a program catches our attention and we stop. And for some reason, there's something that we saw that stopped us in our tracks. Even though the program is already half over, it has stopped us, and that means that it has affected us. Something has hit at our core. And that's not by coincidence. This is by design. When a filmmaker is able to do that, he is able to utilize the circle to its full potential. He's able to take all these stories and connect with people, connect with their emotion, connect with what's inside their core. But remember when I said that storytelling can create magic? It can also destroy. Because when you have the story and you have the circle readily available to you. Some filmmakers, unfortunately, create an inner circle within that circle, and this is the problem. When you create that inner circle within a larger circle, what you're essentially doing is you are alienating yourself from what's happening in the outside world. You are choosing to choose the people, the stories that you want to project, that you want to highlight, and leaving the rest outside. And by doing that, by building these thick walls around you, you will, sooner or later, be so disconnected with the outside world that you won't be able to be effective. You won't be able to come out of that cocoon that you've built around yourself. And just like a tree, if you build a thick wall around it, it will shrivel up, wither up, and die. So today the challenge is not to do that, to be able to open up your circle, to be open to new ideas, to be open to new viewpoints, to poetic interpretations, if you want to call them. And it is only by doing so are we able to communicate with the outside world. And nobody does this better than our Arab filmmakers. There is a huge movement in Arab cinema today where filmmakers have been able to tap into that thing that's shared amongst all of us. Because I have to argue here that there's nothing in you that is not in everybody else, and nothing in everybody else that's not in you. So you need to find that thing. Whether the thing is finding a sense of identity, or our need for imagination and escape, or realization that our hope and resilience can actually give us a green bike, or the importance of friendship in the stickiness of life, or our struggle to modernize our insular societies, or our need to fight injustice and prejudice. And all those filmmakers, many others, they are making us care emotionally, intellectually, aesthetically. They are making us care. And our talented young artists right here in Kuwait are also showing us the same thing. Slowly but surely they are. Films by Ahmed Al-Khalaf, Fawaz Al-Matrouk, Dan Al-Ma'jal, Abdallah Bushehri, Dawood Sh'ail, Miqdad Al-Koot, Mish'al Al-Hlail, Faisal Al-Duwaysan, and many others. These are the future curtain pillars and ringmasters of our cinematic stories. They are creating little films from the heart. Through the circle that feeds their stories and the lens that captures them, they are making us care. They are inviting us to step out of our comfort zones, out of our little cocoons, introducing us to people we've never met before, or perhaps been biased against. Fueled by frustration, by artistry, and a need to share important stories, they are asking the questions and offering the visual answers. Through the circle of their lens, they are expanding our horizons. And they are working together to make it happen. And all of a sudden, it's no longer about the director or the writer or actor, it's about the story. It's about the network, the free-flowing exchange of emotion. It's about the circle. Thank you.